Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will tell you 3 bone-chilling paranormal stories that will give you a haunted feeling. Prepare for a spine-chilling journey with tales of Avalina's doll, a seemingly innocent toy with a sinister past, the eerie events surrounding a crying boy, and the horrors hidden behind your eyes. These creepy encounters with possessed dolls and haunted spirits will leave you questioning every creak and shadow in your home. Discover the dark secrets of a beloved toy, unravel the mystery of a haunted suburban home, and step into the shadows of an abandoned house with a horrifying truth. These stories are not for the faint-hearted, so turn off the lights, sit back, and get ready for a night of fear. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more thrilling content. Watch if you dare.
Story 1. Avalina's Doll by Unknown.
Just last week, my mom's favorite Vietnam doll from the 70s broke by falling off her shelf from a loud commotion. It was made out of a type of glass that a vase would be made of. She seemed somewhat negatively affected by it. I told her that I'd see what I could do to get it replaced. She told me that the only reason why it meant so much to her is because she'd had it ever since she was 7. She's never owned something so long. After I heard about the accident, she told me that a garage sale was just up the street from her place. So I took a stroll there and checked out what they had. The garage sale was ran by an old man and his wife. Most of what they were selling were movies from the 60s or children's books. Must be grandparents, I'd assume. Nothing much came to interest, except for this doll at the sale. It looked oddly alike to my mom's Vietnam doll. It was a bit bizarre. It had the long dark hair, the beautiful dark red dress, the little black slips, and even the pale white on its skin. But something was a bit strange about the doll. The eyes were a pitch black instead of a baby blue. I thought nothing of it and approached the old man and asked him how much the doll was. He just laughed a little and said, "I remember that doll. It's a China doll. It used to belong to my granddaughter. Too bad she passed." I asked him what he meant, and he told me, "My granddaughter was 16 when she died. She committed suicide. God only knows why she did it." I thought a little deep into it, then asked how much the doll was again, realizing I never even got an answer to how much it cost in the first place. He told me that he wasn't even going to charge me for it. He just wanted it out of his sight. I replied with a soft, "Thank you." I kept thinking about how oddly strange and suspicious that old man was. When I arrived home, I showed my mom the doll. "It's perfect," she replied with a huge grin on her face. Ever since then, she has not said anything negative about the doll. All she said was it oddly looked exactly like hers. And I notice how she's been attached to it. Whenever I go over to her house, I see her in her rocking chair, rocking back and forth, staring into the doll's darkened eyes. It's a little creepy. So after that, I took a break from going over to her house because I had this nightmare the other day after seeing how attached she's been to the doll. The nightmare started out where I was in a well-lit room. I knew I was dreaming, but in the dream I was trying to uncover something. Across from where I was standing, there was a little girl. She looked quite similar to the doll itself. I asked her what she wanted. She told me she was there to warn me about the horrors that the doll holds in place. I asked her what she meant. She told me that the doll that was in the possession of my mother was possessed by an evil spirit. It explains a little to why my mom has been acting so bizarre and unusual lately. In my dream, I asked if I could destroy the doll. She said no, as it could be released and the evil spirit will be into easier contact with my mother's body. It could cause my mom to get possessed. The little girl told me that I should try to get rid of the doll somehow, other than trying to destroy it. Unfortunately, I didn't know much at that time. It was only a nightmare. God only knows if what the girl in my dream spoke of was even a real thing. The day after I had that nightmare, bizarre things began to happen. My mom was acting a bit strange. She no longer answered my phone calls, nor even called me. Something was wrong, and I had to get to the bottom of it. I went over to my mom's house, and when I approached the door, it was already open. What horrors could be in there? I dashed inside and into my mom's room. Ahead, she was in a corner, shivering. She turned around and she grinned. Something was off about her. Her eyes were darkened. I stumbled back in terror. "What's wrong? You don't like how I look?" her demonic voice said. I then noticed the brutal cuts up and down her arms. What the fuck is going on? I wondered. I need to see a priest before this goes too far. The next time, I have just spoken to a priest about what's been going on with my mother. The only problem was that I had to wait 5 days for him to get here. He recently arrived at the house. I held the door open to precede him inside the house. I stumbled up the stairs with the man, explaining what's been going on with her and the doll. He simply replied, "Was it Avalina's doll?" I didn't know what he spoke of, so I questioned him about the name, Avalina. He told me that she was about 10 years old and she lived with her grandparents. She one day was roaming the attic, looking for a spare light bulb, and instead, she found the China doll. The doll my mom owned as her own. Avalina decided to call the doll Emily. A little after she found the doll, Avalina noticed something wrong about the doll. She warned her grandparents about the horrors the doll held. It showed her things she didn't want to witness. As punishment, they trapped her in the cellar of their house until she quit her nonsense about the China doll, but she still spoke of the China doll. Then it came one day that they bound her to a chair in the cellar and lit her on fire. Her burnt corpse faded into the grass as they sprinkled her ashes in the yard of their home. I knew there was something off about that old couple, and I finally found out what. After our discussion, we approached my mother's room. We walked inside, and my mom was curled up into a ball on her bed. This black stuff oozed out of her back, where there appeared to be a deep cut. He told me to wait outside the room, and I did so. All I heard the whole time waiting was chanting and screaming. I just waited patiently, trying not to ask what the wait was. About 30 minutes later, he brought me into the room and explained that the entity that possessed my mother was the same exact one that manipulated Avalina. The priest told me that in order to fix everything back to the way it was, the China doll had to be buried. I took the doll to an abandoned ranch not that far from where my mom's house was. I buried the doll, and ever since, everything's been fine. For about a week, my mom's spoken about that China doll, Emily. The most bizarre thing is that a day after the entity left my mom's spirit, the old couple's house up from where my mom lives was burned down with them still inside, sound asleep in their bed. Some even said that they spotted a little girl in an area with dark hair and a red dress. She looked a lot similar to how the doll looked itself. To this day, I wonder if the soul was laying to rest, or if a doorway opened from another dimension, a dimension that can't be closed.
Story 2. A Crying Boy by Curly Brace XD.
In 1997, after acquiring enough savings, I moved my wife, Deborah, and 2 daughters, Shirley and Clarice, into the suburbs of Baltimore, Maryland. The house in particular was a large duplex with friendly, inviting neighbors and a generally warm atmosphere, so we expected nothing more than the usual living accommodations. The history of the house was never explained to me thoroughly by the manager, but this did not bug me in the slightest. The first several weeks went by with little to no dilemma, as we managed to unpack and set up our belongings rather quickly. Deborah would call me while I was at work at a local computer scripting service, telling me how great our new home was and boasting about the easy living, which included enough rooms for all of us and a pool out back. I would smile and agree. Shirley and Clarice also loved the house and found plenty of games to play around in the large space availability. The 2 slept in the same room together near ours, so they could easily access us in case of an emergency. By the 5th week of living here, the 2 came storming into our bedroom doorway very late into the night, both claiming to hear a little boy crying near their bedroom window. Deborah and I both exchanged confused and frightened looks, but proceeded to examine their room. It was relatively empty, save for a few toys lying about. "We heard it, Daddy," they both exclaimed. "Heard what?" I asked, puzzled. They both began to describe the boy as sounding very much afraid and crying through the night, even singing to himself quietly at one point. I peered out the window and turned my gaze downwards. Nothing. I exchanged them both confused looks and decided it was best to have them sleep between Deborah and I in our bedroom. They nodded in agreement and I tucked them inside. Granted, I was unable to fall asleep for a while, but eventually drifted off after an hour or so, throughout which I did not hear the mysterious crying. A dream began, however, and I found myself in an open field bound plentiful with wheat. I shoved through the tall grass and our new house eventually came into view. but the houses that would be around it were not visible. I entered the threshold and saw that the house was empty and that pieces of furniture had been randomly stacked atop each other. Odd, I thought. I made my way to the curio and approached the swimming pool. I slowly turned my attention to the very bottom of the pool, for which a young boy lay in a sleeping position below. The boy promptly disappeared and reappeared before me on dry land. "Who are you?" I asked nervously, clenching my hands in disbelief. The boy, who was around 6 or 7 years of age and dressed in rusty overalls and a striped tee, slowly looked up into me, his misty eyes staring right up into mine. Despite this outward appearance, he seemed friendly, and I perished any thought of trying to fight him. "I'm sorry," the boy responded. "It's okay," I replied back, patting him on the shoulder. We talked for a while, and he seemed content during the conversation, almost pleased that I was with him. At this point, he grabbed my hand and began to mutter gibberish under his breath. I stood motionless and urged him to quit, but he seemed to have entered a somewhat possessed state, and the strange words became louder. "Where is she?" he suddenly asked, his face now wrinkled up in anger. He repeated this several times, each time his grip became stronger. "I don't know." I snapped back, attempting to break free of his iron grip, to no avail. He remained silent at this point, and continued to strengthen his grip, becoming more and more persistent by the expression on his face. After an intense struggle, I pulled my arm free and pushed him away, making a beeline for the front door and making no stops to look behind. I finally exited the door and ran out into the fields. The house was now lit aflame, and I could see the boy screaming in agony from one of the upward windows. I felt guilty and ashamed, but I could not do anything to help the boy. I awoke into the dark of night, breathing heavily and sweating intensely. Deborah took notice and calmed me, using the sheets to wipe me down. "What happened, dear? Did you have a nightmare?" she asked, worried. "Yes," I replied. "Just go back to sleep," she said. We managed to fall back asleep shortly afterwards, and I could not recall any dreams afterwards. The next morning, I asked the manager to evaluate more on the building's history. He gave me this look of despair and finally delivered. He told me that the building once burst into flames some 20 years prior due to an accident of unknown cause. According to his claim, one of the past owner's sons died in the cataclysm and was unable to be rescued by firefighters. The house was rebuilt, he continued, but some say it has remained the same.
Story 3. Behind Your Eyes. By Unknown.
My grandma used to live in a house that was ancient. The house was falling apart and had a termite infestation. We told her many times that she could move in with us if she wanted to, but she always said that she liked the house. For years ago, she passed away. It was a really tragic event. I didn't want to know what the cause of her death was, so I never asked, probably natural causes. Her house was left to rot. It was abandoned. My mother fell into depression after my grandma's passing. She didn't want to talk to me, or to anyone. She just locked herself in her room and only came out when she had to go to work or go to the bathroom. My dad worried for her. I wanted her to get better, so I started thinking of things that would make her happy. After going through many ideas, I finally came up with the perfect one. Her birthday was coming up, so I wanted to get her a present. I thought that getting her something that Grandma had owned would make her feel as if Grandma was still close to her, so that is what I decided to get her. I knew that most of Grandma's stuff was still in her house, so I was going to go to her house and take something from there. I grabbed my backpack and my phone and hurried out the door. Good thing her house was close by. I entered the front porch. The smell of old wood lingered in the air. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I checked if there were any open windows, but there weren't any. I checked the back of the house and was surprised by something. There was a cellar door. I walked towards it and tried to open it, and to my surprise it opened up. The only thing I saw beyond the door was darkness. I didn't have a flashlight on me, but I still decided to enter. Luckily enough, light came from outside to let me see what I was doing. There was nothing at all at first glance, just trash and dirt. But at second glance, I noticed a brown door in the corner of the room. I walked towards the door. My hands were trembling with fear, and my stomach was full of anxiety. I had no idea what the resolution of this was going to be. I reached for the doorknob. It was cold and dull. I started twisting it slowly. The door opened and I forced myself into the room. I thought of going back, but it was too late. I nervously swallowed saliva and progressed to my destination. The room was dark and humid. The smell of dust filled the air. My eyes quickly darted towards a white box that was sitting in the middle of the room. The box looked like it had been beaten up. It had wrinkles and some writing on it. I walked towards it. I couldn't tell what the writing on it said. It looked like it was gibberish. I lifted the box up and put in my backpack. I wasn't going to waste time opening the box. I had to leave. I advanced to exit the room when I heard a whisper coming from behind me. At first it sounded like it was just the wind shaking a tree, but then I began to distinguish words. "Where are you going?" Goosebumps raced down my body. I looked behind me. The thing that was behind me was almost inexplicable. It was a young woman. She was missing half of her body. The skin on her face was torn apart, and you could see the muscles twitching and the blood spurting out. She also stunk of rotten meat. She looked at me. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. Should I run? I thought. My eyes, I want them back, she rasped. I ran out of the room as fast as I could. I went up the stairs and exited the house. I started to slow down when I was halfway to my house because I had to catch my breath. What had I seen back then? When I got home, I hurried to my bedroom. I tried to open up the white box by hand, but I was unsuccessful. It had too much tape on it. I went to the kitchen and got a knife. I cut open the tape and opened the box. A pair of eyes looked back at me. Inside the box was a pair of rotten, wrinkly, veiny, disembodied human eyes. I instantly let out a yelp. I didn't know what to do with them. I noticed a piece of paper behind the eyes. I went to my trash can and emptied out the eyes. I took out the paper. It was a picture of a young woman. Exactly the same young woman that I had seen in the cellar. I heard something behind me. I turned around and discovered my dad giving me a confused look. "Why are you holding a picture of your grandma?" he asked placidly.
Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to listen to similar stories in future.